Hello, my name is Anne Anderson, and today I'd like to introduce you to Lars Sonck, one of the most important but perhaps eclipsed architects who created a very distinctive national romantic Jugendstil style for Finland at the turn of the 20th century. Sonck's reputation has largely been eclipsed by the big three, as I like to refer to them: Gesellius, Lindgren and Sarrinen. Sarrinen being most famous for his railway station in Helsinki, and then emigrating to America in 1923 with his son Eero Saarinen becoming one of the most famous American architects. Lars Sonck's reputation rests very much on the buildings that he created in Helsinki and further afield in Turku and Tampere, where he created the cathedral. And for those of you traveling to Helsinki for the first time, I'm hoping that even if you do not stray that far from the main harbour where your cruise ship will dock, you'll discover this amazing Jugend Hall interior. It was originally created as a banking hall, but is now a rather plush cafe with some wonderful representations in terms of its decoration of this idea of creating a Finnish identity through architecture at the end of the 19th century. And there, looking extremely serious, is Lars Sonck himself. He was a homegrown architect. He didn't travel abroad to study, but was a product of the Helsinki Polytechnic. So well versed, not just in architecture, but in building techniques. And his generation, although they would travel extensively on scholarships, were a product of new national institutions like the Polytechnic School. And they were even more keen, in the face of Russification, to create a national Finnish style of architecture. So they would blend national romanticism and Jugendstil, as it's referred to in the north, rather than Art Nouveau, which we associate very much with France and Belgium. And they would also blend that with arts and crafts, as they were interested in local styles and local materials, the vernacular. So I'm showing you here, in fact, the Finnish National Theatre, as it's an exemplary national romantic building created out of granite, which was said to embody the tough spirit of the Finnish nation. And the architect of this is Onni Tarjan and dates to 1902. Closer inspection would reveal lots of references to the local flora and fauna. But many of the decorative elements are also derived, the patterns that is, are also derived from Finnish textiles, embroidery and weaving. The main architectural form, as you can see, is a curved arch. And it may surprise you to know that this was derived not, in fact, from looking at anything European, but from traveling to America, where Henry Hobson Richardson was doing his best to create a national style for America. Richardson is best known for the famous Trinity Cathedral in Boston, immediately facing the library, which is in his Richardsonian Romanesque style. Distinctive features are not just the round-headed arches, but also the squat columns, and also these towers that are embedded in the walls and then again capped with little conical tops. This particular Richardsonian building can be found in Lowell, Massachusetts. It's the City Hall, and you can see here the dominance of the round-headed arch, which gives rise to the term Richardsonian or Romanesque. But also, please note things like oriel windows, spires, tall towers, and particularly those little squat columns, which you will find will become a distinctive feature of the buildings in Helsinki. You can see an immediate echo of the Romanesque style of Richardson here in Lars Sonck's headquarters of the Helsinki Telephonist Association, built between 1903 and 1907. The granite, to give this idea of the spirit of Finland and also a local natural material. the squat columns, the oriel window embedded with its conical roof, the very tall tower at the end, and the decorative motifs, which are often very stylized foliage. They loved acorns, pine trees, pine cones, and ferns can be seen carved on the columns and some of the capitals. Here's a better view of that embedded oriel window with its rather distinctive geometric patterning around the top and those squat columns right at the very top of the building. Here, a closer view of the unusual patterning around the top of the embedded tower, and then more geometric motifs on the little squat towers holding up the conical dome of the roof. This is a particularly distinctive feature that you'll find on many Jugendstil buildings. Now you can see above the top of the arch some rather lovely carved motifs. So they took many of their motifs from embroidery and other textiles, but also wood carving. These appear to be stylized ferns. But then the door itself is an arch within a triangle, or a Gothic arch, supported again by squat columns. This is going to be a feature, the round arch within a pointy or Gothic arch, which will be reprised quite often in Finnish National Romantic Jugendstil architecture. Now, Lars Sonck was but a novice architect. He'd only just graduated from the Polytechnic at the end of the 1890s when he was given his first major commission, which was the magnificent St. Michael's Church, which you'll see the entrance to on the right-hand side. The painted decoration here is definitely stylized foliage, pine cones around the top, and then the curling ferns, which have been highly stylized. So St. Michael's Turku dates to 1899 and 1904 and is described as being in a neo-Gothic style. Nevertheless, there are still many references to Finnish identity in the decorative motifs. Looking here at the main entrance, particularly the painted decoration, and this is a brick building as opposed to a granite one. But nevertheless, you can see that Sonck has looked to German prototypes to create his very distinctive St. Michael's Church, Turku. Turku was the original capital of Finland before it was moved to Helsinki under Tsar Alexander in the opening years of the 19th century, as he wanted it to be nearer, the capital, to St. Petersburg. So inside here, the painted decoration has a very distinctive Jugendstil look to it. Jugend simply means youth and was used in the north to refer to Art Nouveau, but you won't find the overt whiplash or coupe de fouet curvy linear elements of Victor Horta or Hector Guimard here in Finland. It's much more restrained, much more geometric. They looked to Germany, in particular to Darmstadt for inspiration, and of course to Vienna, where the secession was headed by Otto Wagner, Josef Hoffmann and Adolf Loos in terms of the architectural masterpieces. So looking here towards the high altar, I've got some close-ups to show you how distinctive the ornamentation is. Natural forms, highly stylized and almost Art Deco already. Remember, we are pre-1905. And like many architects, he believed in the Gesamtkunstwerk, so every element was designed by Sonck, including these wonderful light fittings. I'm particularly fascinated by the way they reinterpret the Gothic arch by knocking off the top and also by giving their arches very distinctive shoulders. So this is going to be another feature that we can look at when we get to Helsinki. You can see it here, a sort of broad arch, which rather like a coat hanger, appears to have shoulders. The soapstone pulpit is very distinctive in the interior of St. Michael's Turku, and you can see more of this elaborate patterning on the wall behind what appears to be olive branches. Again, this might relate back to Vienna in terms of looking for sources. And around the very stylized main window, you can see unfurling ferns. This appears to be a particularly popular motif. Jugendstil was so broad in its sources that sometimes looking here at the patterning immediately above the lectern or pulpit, there's almost an Egyptian feel to some of it. So they would have been very widely read. Even if they didn't travel to England, they would know about modern design via magazines like The Studio, German Art and Decoration, Jugend itself, which simply means youth, which was published in Munich from 1896. So don't think of these architects as insular. They were very outward looking. It was the new modern way was to be traditional, and internationalism, ironically, fostered national identity. So here around the entrance to the Finnish Pavilion for Paris 1900, which remember was part of the Grand Duchy, is the Grand Duchy of Finland, part of Russia at this time, which you can see here running round the entrance to the Finnish Pavilion, lots of bear heads. So the bear, I think, more than anything, is the motif that I particularly associate with Finland. And you can also see above the heads of the men on the right-hand side, a stylized pine cone. So that distinctive arch and these decorative motifs will help us to identify Finnish Jugendstil. So Sonck would have been very well aware of the amazing Finnish pavilion created by Herman Gesellius Lindgren and Sarrinen for Paris 1900. It was a cause célèbre. We have many photographs of it because, of course, the pavilion sadly no longer exists. It does look rather like a giant church with lots of interesting symbolism. All those spires are said to be maypoles, which was, of course, a very important midsummer festival across all the Nordic countries. And there was a giant maypole right on the top. Immediately below it, we appear to have a series of sunbursts. Again, perhaps this idea that Jugendstil was looking forward to the new century. Around the base of the tower, you can see more bears. In this poster or postcard, you can see how Finnish identity was transmitted to a broad audience. We have what appears to be a Russian soldier looking down at a dead wolf with hunters. Again, there's fascination around the wilderness of Finland. But this image combines that wilderness element with agriculture. We've got a peasant woman in probably Karelian costume. Karelia is an area that spans Finland and Russia and was seen to be where the true spirit of Finland had survived. So this is an interesting blend of celebrating the agricultural richness of Finland alongside that wilderness. And you can see in the vignettes down the bottom, another important industry, fishing. So it's very much a popularist image of Finland, this combination of a rural peasant economy and the wild northern climes, which, as you know, in Finland extends right the way up to the Arctic Circle. So architects wanted to express Finnishness at the turn of the century, as Finland was undergoing a period of Russification. Under Tsar Nicholas from 1899, there was a concerted effort to bring Finland within the imperial project of Russia. So they wanted the first language to be Russian. There was a suppression of many independent newspapers, and ardent nationalists were deported. So all quite prescient in the current climate. So here's an apartment block by Lars Sonck. It's on Frederiksgatan 2 and is pretty typical of the style. These apartment blocks look like giant fortresses. The most important parts to be decorated around the windows, along the roof line, and some very magnificent doorways. As you can see in this case, the doorway is decorated by two confronting sphinxes, the number 32. When looking at the ornamental motifs, which are normally in plaster, it's sometimes difficult to interpret them. Are they natural motifs derived from ferns and other plant life, or are they purely geometric ornamentation? Like I said, I hope if you've gone in on a cruise that you might have found the amazing Jugend Hall. but you can be forgiven for missing it, as it doesn't look anything Jugendstil from the outside and is rather prosaically known as Robert's Coffee Shop. It was created by Lars Sonck, working with Walter Jung, and it really is a tour de force of Jugendstil ornamentation. We're looking here towards the apsidal end with its magnificent depiction of the Finnish countryside. As you would easily miss it, you have to enter through this rather cave-like lobby. It's semicircular ceiling, it's arch ceiling decorated with stylized birds. Just before you enter the cafe, to remind you that it was once a banking hall, we have a bag of money on one side and two gentlemen on the other. One is a banker counting out his coins, and the other appears to be a poor man or a pauper who has come in search of a loan. And this is to remind you of what it looked like when it was a banking hall. I wonder what they thought of the extreme ornamentation around them, but it was certainly meant to embody Finnishness. There are a lot of cats. Now, in Finland, cats can sometimes be quite homely creatures, protectors of hearth and home, as you can see here, quite cute. On other occasions, they can be quite fierce, as in Finnish mythology, the cat is a composite creature made up of a hare, that's the head, with those quivering noses, but also a snake, a viper, hence the fangs that you see here, and the claws of an eagle. So definitely you should not argue with a Finnish cat. So we have a series of alcoves to either side, which are now for sitting in, but were where the tellers originally sat. Very elaborate painted plaster decoration, and the capitals are decorated with stylized birds. These appear to be ducks. In the background, perhaps doves. Here's another view of a triple arrangement of ducks. They're really rather cute. I love the way their little webbed feet curve over the edge. And on the other capital, are they stylized doves? Again, they seem to be in a pattern of 3 with 2 birds in profile. Here's another of these wonderful cats, again, to show you the interconnection between the capitals and the painted stucco decoration. Again, it looks like it's ferns and stylized leaves, but there's lots of geometric patterning as well, as you can see here. Sometimes it looks even a little Eastern, Islamic, these arrangements of circles, squares, and triangles. Here's a close-up of one of the alcoves, just to show you how magnificent the ornamentation is, and also their preferred colours. They tend to go for ochres and reds, as you can see. And here at the far end, the apse itself, with this wonderfully evocative landscape of Finland. And looking up at the ceiling, we appear to have, well, they look almost like dragon heads looking down at us. The whole thing reminded me rather of going into a Viking long hall. And the apse is supported by some truly awesome capitals. Rather grumpy looking mustachioed man. And on the other column, is that a young girl? I don't know. Every time I look at elements like this, I think of the famous Kalevala, the great mythic saga created around 1835, which again fed in the Jugendstil period into the motifs that they used to express Finnish identity, the Kalevala. Sonck soon grew out of the Jugendstil style, however, and began to develop what becomes known as Nordic classicism. This is the Stock Exchange of 1911, and it is now a rather exclusive restaurant. We've moved back to a classical facade, not the irregularity or picturesqueness of the neo-Gothic. And the stylized motifs still look vaguely Finnish in the sense that they appear here to be stylized trees, as you can see in my close-up. When I first saw this building, I thought it was Art Deco, but again, it predates the First World War. And here's the entrance with the word Bors, because of course it was originally the Stock Exchange, which has now moved on. And as you enter again this rather cave-like entrance, there's some very obvious Finnish motifs in terms of the decoration of the arch. And here's another example of Sonck's distinctive Nordic classical style on Esplanadi, which is one of the main routes into the city centre. This was originally built for a mortgage company. And you can see again this adaptation of Nordic classicism to a very Finnish language in terms of the decorative motifs. Again, with much emphasis on a sort of very Finnish style top to the capitals, stylized trees again, I think, and here in the entrance with that elaborate metalwork, and in the wood carving, some rather attractive birds immediately as you enter. The final two buildings I'm going to show you in Helsinki are churches. The Kallio Church of 1912, which is in a working class area, is a really good example of Sonck's Nordic classicism. So this is in the harsh or rugged granite style. It has some very obvious Finnish decorative motifs on the apse and at the top of the tower. That distinctive patterning of 3 for the Trinity. And inside, it's rather like his earlier church at Turku, St. Michael's, in its painted decoration. But now it's very much calmed down, and the repertoire is more classical than overtly Finnish in terms of its sources. And finally, this, the Mikael Agricola Church, also in Helsinki, 1933 to 95. Immediately when I saw this, I thought of the famous Stockholm City Hall with its brick tower and its spire. The spire here stands out on the Helsinki skyline. And this is not rugged granite, but brick, which was particularly used by architects working in the German expressionist style immediately after the First World War. German expressionist architects were very keen on the parabolic or catenary arch as well. You'll also find this in Barcelona with Antonio Gaudí. So imagine a chain. If you pull it in, it'll create a very sharp arch. If you pull it out, it'll be a very shallow one. And here the catenary arch is used for the interior of Lars Sonck's Agricola Church. Again, a very austere but quite remarkable interior. You can find out more about my lectures at anne-anderson.com, my website. If you go under the heading Art History with Anne, you'll also find some of my blogs at anne-anderson.com. And I post my lectures on my YouTube site, Anne Anderson Art and Design History. Here you'll find around about 30 to view lectures for free. Please press the subscribe button. I'd be very grateful if you would. There's no economic cost. It simply means I can build up my numbers. But if you want to subscribe to my lectures, or if you want to actually participate in my online delivery of lectures, again, please look at my website. And you can pay for my lectures. I do charge a modest amount through the PayPal system. So perhaps you might like to join me in person from the comfort of your own living room. Thank you for your time.